8-year-old girl being stalked asked bikers for help. What they did next put 15 predators behind bars. 8-year-old Lily walked to school the same way every morning until the day she noticed the van. Same spot, same man, same hungry stare. Her parents didn't believe her. The police said there wasn't enough evidence. But when she whispered her terror to a grizzled biker outside a diner, something unexpected happened. These men, society's outcasts, the ones parents warned their children about, became her protectors. What they uncovered wasn't just one predator, it was 15. A network operating for 6 years. And what they did next would change everything about how we see the monsters among us and the angels we refuse to recognize. Before we dive into Lily's incredible journey, I need you to do something. If you believe children deserve to be protected, if you believe in communities standing up when systems fail, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel tells stories that matter. Stories about courage, kindness, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And I need you here for every single one. And drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from, your city, your state, your country. Because Lily's story happened in a small Pennsylvania town, but predators exist everywhere. And so do guardians. I want to see how far this message reaches. So comment below, where are you watching from? And do you believe communities can protect children better than systems alone? Let me take you back to where it all began. To a small town called Brookhaven, to a little girl with purple sneakers and a golden retriever, to a morning that seemed ordinary but would change hundreds of lives forever. This is Lily's story. And it starts with 6 blocks between home and school. A walk she'd made 1,000 times before until the day the white van appeared in the heart of Pennsylvania. Tucked between rolling hills and farmland, sits Brookhaven, a town of 12,000 souls where Friday night football games draw, bigger crowds than the movie theater, and where the biggest scandal in recent memory was when Old Man Henderson's prize-winning tomatoes turned out to be store-bought. This is where 8-year-old Lily Jenkins grew up. 3rd grade. Gap-toed smile. Freckles scattered across her nose like constellations. The kind of kid who still believed in magic, who left cookies out for Santa even though her older brother had spilled the secret 2 Christmases ago. Every weekday morning at 7:30, Lily would lace up her purple sneakers, the ones with the glittery stars, kiss her golden retriever buddy on his scruffy head, and set out on her 6-block walk to Brookhaven Elementary. She knew every crack in the sidewalk, every neighbor's garden, every shortcut through Mrs. Patterson's yard where the lilacs bloomed in spring. Her father, Michael, owned Jenkins Auto Repair on Main Street. Hands perpetually stained with engine grease, heart as reliable as the '67 Mustang he'd been restoring for a decade. Her mother, Mary, worked the night shift at Brookhaven General Hospital. A nurse who came home exhausted but never too tired to check Lily's homework or listen to stories about art class because art class that was Lily's favorite. She'd spend hours with watercolors and construction paper creating worlds where golden retrievers could fly and where every day felt as safe as this one. Where the biggest worry was whether she'd remembered to pack her lunch or if she'd finish her spelling words before recess. In Brookhaven, everyone knew everyone. Doors stayed unlocked. Children played outside until the streetlights came on, and 8-year-old girls walked to school alone because nothing bad ever happened here. Nothing bad ever happened here until it did. Tuesday, October 12th. The morning started like any other. Lily skipped down Maple Street, humming a song from music class, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. The October air carried that perfect autumn crispness. Cool enough for her favorite hoodie, warm enough that the sun felt like a blessing on her face. She was 2 blocks from school when she first saw it. A white van parked along the curb near the crossing guard station. Nothing unusual about that. Vans parked on streets all the time. Delivery drivers, contractors, parents running late. But something about this one made Lily slow her pace. The engine was running. She could see the exhaust curling into the morning air. And inside, behind tinted windows that weren't quite dark enough, she could make out the silhouette of a man, just sitting there, not getting out, not doing anything, just watching. Lily felt a prickle at the back of her neck, that instinct we're all born with, the one that kept our ancestors alive on ancient plains. The one that whispers, "Something isn't right." She hurried past, eyes forward, heart beating just a little faster than normal. At school, she forgot about it. Mrs. Morrison's art class erased everything else. They were making papiche masks and Lily's was going to be a butterfly. Wednesday morning, same walk, same time, and there it was again. The white van, same spot, same running engine, same shadowy figure inside. Lily told herself she was being silly. It was probably just someone waiting to pick up their kid or a worker on break. Brookhaven was safe. Mom and Dad always said so. Nothing bad happens here. Thursday, the van was there again. Friday, it was there again. By now, Lily had started to notice details. The van had no company logo, no magnetic signs advertising plumbing or electrical work. The license plate was mud-splattered, hard to read. And the man inside, she could see him more clearly now in the October dawn light. He was watching, not looking at his phone, not reading a newspaper, watching the children walk to school, watching her. The weekend offered blessed relief. 2 full days without that walk, without that van, without those eyes. Lily played with Buddy in the backyard, helped her dad organize his tool chest, watched movies with her mom before the night shift. She almost convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing. Monday morning arrived with cold rain. Lily's mom offered to drive her. She had the morning off and the weather was miserable, but Lily insisted she was fine. She was 8 years old now. Big girls didn't need rides for 6 blocks. She would regret that choice for years to come because there it was, the white van. Same spot, engine running, windshield wipers moving slowly back and forth like a metronome counting down to something terrible. Lily's stomach twisted. This wasn't coincidence anymore. This was pattern. This was purpose. She kept her head down, walking faster, rain soaking through her hoodie. She was almost past the van when she heard it. The electric hum of a window rolling down. "Hi, Lily." Her blood turned to ice. The voice was friendly, almost gentle, the kind of voice that might belong to someone's grandfather or a friendly teacher. But it came from the van. It came from a stranger, and it knew her name. Lily ran. She ran like Buddy chased her in the backyard, like the ground was lava, like her life depended on speed. She didn't stop until she reached the crossing guard, Mrs. Chun, who looked at her with concern but not understanding. "You okay, sweetie? Rough morning?" Lily nodded, unable to speak. Rain and tears mixing on her face. What Lily didn't know was that this wasn't random. She had been selected, watched, studied. The man in the van had followed her routine for 2 weeks before making himself visible. A calculated strategy designed to create exactly what Lily was feeling now. Confusion, fear, isolation. Predators don't pounce immediately. They're patient. They're methodical. They groom their environment just as carefully as they groom their victims. Testing boundaries, measuring reactions, waiting for the perfect moment when a child is too afraid, too confused, too conditioned to their presence to run anymore. The man in the van had done this before. He knew the precise amount of fear to instill, enough to make Lily compliant, not enough to make her scream. He knew that an 8-year-old who'd been taught to be polite, to trust adults, to not make a scene would doubt herself long before she'd sound an alarm. He knew that in a town like Brookhaven, where nothing bad ever happened, nobody would believe her anyway. And he was counting on exactly that. That evening, Lily sat at the kitchen table picking at her spaghetti while her parents discussed their days. Her mother was exhausted from a double shift. Her father had grease under his fingernails from a transmission rebuild that had taken 6 hours longer than expected. Lily knew they were tired, but she had to tell them. "There's a man who watches me walk to school." The words came out smaller than she'd intended. Her mother looked up from her plate, concern flickering across her face. Her father set down his fork. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Lily explained. "The white van. 5 days in a row, same spot, same time. The man inside just watching. And then today, the rain, the window rolling down, her name spoken by a stranger." Her father's jaw tightened. "He said your name?" Lily nodded. "Are you sure you're not imagining it, sweetheart?" Her mother asked gently. "Sometimes when we're nervous about something, our minds can play tricks." "I'm not imagining it," Lily's voice cracked. "He was there. He knew my name." Her parents exchanged a look. That adult look that said they were communicating in a language children couldn't understand. "Okay," her father said, his voice steady and calm. "Okay, tomorrow morning I'm driving you to school. And I'm going to take a look at this van myself." Lily felt a wave of relief. Finally, someone believed her. Someone would see. Tuesday morning, her father drove her route slowly, carefully, looking for the white van. They circled the block twice, nothing, no van, no watching man. Just empty streets and early morning quiet. "Maybe he's gone," her father said hopefully. Maybe it was just someone passing through. But Lily's instincts were right. In fact, she had no idea how right she was. Wednesday, Lily told her teacher, Mrs. Peterson, during morning recess. The teacher listened with a sympathetic expression, patted Lily's shoulder, and promised to mention it to the principal. By lunch, Lily was called to Principal Morrison's office. Her parents were on speakerphone. Lily's mentioned some concerns about a man in a van. Principal Morrison said in that careful voice adults use when they think a child is being dramatic. Now, children have very active imaginations, and sometimes what we see isn't quite what we think we see. Could it have been a delivery van, Lily? Maybe someone who works in the neighborhood. It was the same van every day, Lily insisted, her voice rising. The same man, he said my name. Sweetheart, her mother's tiny voice came through the speaker. Maybe you heard him talking to someone else. Another Lily, it's a common name. He was looking at me. The principal and her parents talked around her, not to her. Words like sensitive and adjustment issues and maybe we should consider floated above Lily's head. She felt invisible, crazy, like she was the problem. That evening, her parents called the non-emergency police line. Lily sat on the stairs listening. Has he touched her? Tried to grab her, threatened her? The officer's voice was patient but unmoved without an overt threat or physical contact. There's not much we can do. Could be someone who works in the area. Could be a parent waiting for their own kid. But I'll tell you what, we'll increase patrols in that area during morning hours. Keep an eye out. Her father hung up. Frustration etched across his face. The man in the van, he'd done this before, 12 times before. He knew exactly how long to watch before making contact. He knew that adults would doubt. He knew the system's gaps better than the system knew itself. And Lily was left feeling unheard, dismissed, and utterly alone. If you've ever felt unheard, if you've ever been dismissed when you knew something was wrong, drop a comment saying, I believe you. Because Lily needed someone, anyone, to believe her. 2 weeks crawled by like wounded animals. The white van became as constant as sunrise. Lily tried everything an 8-year-old mind could devise to escape it. She changed her route, taking Oak Street instead of Maple, adding 3 blocks to her walk. The van found her on the second day. Same idling engine, same watching presence. It was as if he could read her mind, anticipate her every move. She started walking with the Henderson twins who lived 2 houses down. Safety in numbers, right? That's what they taught in school assemblies. The van simply followed at a distance, crawling along the curb like a patient predator, waiting for the herd to separate. The nightmare started on a Thursday night. Lily woke up screaming, tangled in her sheets, Buddy whimpering at her bedside. In her dreams, the van had no doors, no way out, and the man inside had no face, just darkness where features should be, and hands that reached and never stopped reaching. Her mother held her, rocked her, whispered soothing things that couldn't penetrate the fear. It was just a dream, baby. Just a dream. But Lily knew better. The dream was just her mind trying to process the waking nightmare that waited for her every single morning. Breakfast became impossible. The smell of eggs made her stomach revolt. Toast sat untouched on her plate. Her mother worried aloud about the weight she was losing, the shadows appearing under her eyes, the way her purple star sneakers seemed looser now when she tied them. Please, Lily begged one morning, tears streaming down her face. Please just drive me. Please, Mom, please, her mother's eyes filled with pain. Sweetheart, I work nights. I don't get home until 7:30 and I need to sleep, and Dad has to open the shop at 7:00. We can't. She stopped herself, seeing the devastation in her daughter's face. What if we asked the Hendersons if their mom can drive all of you? But the Hendersons' mother worked early shifts at the packaging plant. Everyone's schedule was calibrated to the minute, choreographed around work and survival and the demands of working-class life, where flexibility was a luxury no one could afford. Lily stopped asking. Worse than that, she stopped talking about the van entirely because every time she mentioned it, she saw that look in adult eyes. That mixture of concern and doubt, pity and irritation. That look that said, you're being dramatic. You're overreacting. You're making this bigger than it is. She'd been taught her whole life to trust adults, to believe that grown-ups knew better. And now those same grown-ups were telling her in 1,000 subtle ways that her fear was foolish, that her instincts were wrong, that she was the problem. Remember the happy 8-year-old from the beginning? The one who hummed songs and believed in magic and saw the world as fundamentally safe? Watch what fear does to a child. Watch how it curls their shoulders inward, steals the light from their eyes, teaches them that their voice doesn't matter. Lily walked to school now with her head down, her body rigid with tension, her joy replaced by a hypervigilance that exhausted her before first period even started. She jumped at car doors closing. She flinched when men spoke to her in the grocery store. She became small and quiet and careful. The white van appeared every morning like clockwork, and Lily endured it in silence because she'd learned that speaking only made her feel crazier, more alone, more powerless. She was 8 years old and she was suffering alone. Lily was about to make a decision that would save not just herself but hundreds of other children. But first, she had to reach the absolute bottom of her fear. First, she had to break completely because sometimes that's what it takes to find the courage to trust one more time. Joe's Diner sits on the corner of Main and 5th, a relic from another era with its chrome trim and red vinyl booths. Joe Moretti opened it in 1983, and for 40 years it served the same menu. The best apple pie in 3 counties, coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and breakfast served all day because Joe believed a man should be able to get eggs whenever he damn well pleased. Every Saturday morning at 8 Haug, the rumble of motorcycles announces the arrival of the Guardians, a veterans motorcycle club that's been meeting at Joe's for the past 12 years. Now, these aren't the Hells Angels. They're not an outlaw club with criminal ties or violent reputations. The Guardians are something different. A brotherhood of men and women who served their country, came home changed, and found healing in the open road and each other's company. They organize charity rides for children's hospitals. They stand honor guard at military funerals when families have no one else. They raise money for homeless veterans. But most people in Brookhaven don't know that. They see the leather, the patches, the motorcycles, and they make assumptions. Leading the chapter is Marcus Thompson. Everyone calls him Bull, a nickname earned in the jungles of Vietnam, where his stubborn refusal to abandon wounded comrades became legendary. At 62, Bull is a mountain of a man with a gray beard down to his chest, arms covered in faded military tattoos, and hands that have rebuilt engines and held dying friends and rocked Granby babies to sleep. He spent 30 years as a postal worker after the war, retired with full benefits, and now spends his Saturdays riding and his Sundays at his daughter's house playing tea party with his 4 granddaughters. Tony Martinez sits to Bull's left every Saturday, ex-Marine, 2 tours in Iraq. A bronze star he keeps in a drawer because looking at it brings back things he'd rather forget. He's quiet, watchful, the kind of man who notices everything and says little. He works construction now, builds homes with the same precision he once cleared buildings in Fallujah. Jessie Holcomb is the only woman in the chapter, and she doesn't take from anyone. Army nurse served in Afghanistan saw things that still wake her up at 3 in the morning. She's 54 with silver streaks in her black hair and a laugh that can fill a room. She volunteers at Brookhaven General twice a week in the children's wing, because after seeing so much death, she needs to be around life. Ray Cooper rounds out the core group, Desert Storm veteran, soft-spoken, gentle despite a frame built like a linebacker. He teaches Sunday school at First Baptist and coaches Little League. His motorcycle has a bumper sticker that reads, "Freedom isn't free," and another that says, "Hug your kids." These are the Guardians. These are the men and women that parents pull their children away from on the sidewalk. The ones that waitresses serve quickly and nervously. The ones that look dangerous. Motorcycle clubs have a complicated history in America. From the post-World War II veterans, who formed the original clubs as a way to cope with the trauma of war, to the outlaw clubs that gave all bikers a criminal reputation in the 60s and 70s, is to the modern veteran riding clubs trying to reclaim the culture. It's a story of misconception and stereotype. The reality, most bikers are accountants and teachers and plumbers who just happen to love the freedom of 2 wheels. But the leather cuts and loud pipes carry decades of Hollywood mythology that's hard to shake. Lily had always been terrified of them. When the Guardians rode past her house on Saturday mornings, she'd hide behind her father until the thunder of their engines faded. All she saw was noise and sighs and danger. Society taught Lily these men were dangerous. She was about to learn the truth. If you've ever been judged by your appearance, if you know that leather and tattoos don't define character, hit that like button because these men were about to prove every stereotype wrong. Saturday, October 30th. Lily woke to the sound of rain against her window and a weight in her chest that made breathing feel like work. Her mother had the day off, suggested they spend it together. Maybe bake cookies, watch a movie, normal mother otter things. But Lily couldn't sit still. The walls of her house felt too close, the safety too false. She asked if she could go to the park to meet her friend Kayla. Her mother hesitated, saw the desperation in her daughter's eyes, and agreed. The van was there. Of course it was there. Lily saw it as soon as she turned onto Birch Street, white, idling, waiting. It followed her the 4 blocks to Riverside Park, keeping that same careful distance, Never close enough to be obvious, never far enough to offer relief. At the park, Kayla's mom was pushing her younger brother on the swings. Lily ran to her, breathless, pointing back at the street where the van had finally parked. "That van," Lily said, her voice shaking. "There's a man who follows me. He's been following me for weeks. He's there. Right there." Kayla's mom looked where Lily pointed. Then back at Lily with that expression she learned to recognize and hate. Pity mixed with dismissal. "Honey, that's just a parked van. You're being silly. There's nothing to be afraid of." Something inside Lily shattered. Not broke, shattered into so many pieces. She didn't know if they could ever be put back together. She walked away from the playground without another word. Walked without direction or purpose. Just moving because staying still meant drowning. The October rain had turned to drizzle, cold and penetrating, and Lily didn't care. Let it soak her. Let it wash her away entirely. She found herself on Main Street in a part of town she didn't usually go. The rumble of motorcycles had faded, meaning the Saturday morning meeting at Joe's Diner was over, but a few bikes still sat parked outside. Lily's feet stopped moving. She sat down on the curb right there on the sidewalk and began to cry. Not the quiet tears she'd shed into her pillow at night. Not the controlled crying she'd learned to do so she wouldn't worry her parents. This was the kind of crying that comes from the deepest part of a person. The part that holds all the fear and loneliness and desperation that words can't reach. The diner door opened. Heavy boots on pavement. Lily didn't look up. "You okay there, kiddo?" The voice was deep, rough around the edges, but there was something gentle in it that made Lily's head lift. She found herself looking up, way up, at Marcus Bull Thompson. He was massive. His leather vest covered in patches she didn't understand. His gray beard wet with rain. His eyes surprisingly kind. For a moment, they just looked at each other. This 8-year-old girl, small and soaked and broken. This 62-year-old veteran, scarred by war and loss in life, and something passed between them. Recognition may be the kind that happens when someone who's been in darkness sees someone else still trapped in it. "There's a man," Lily whispered in a white van. "He follows me every day. He knows my name and nobody believes me." Bull didn't move, didn't dismiss, didn't offer empty reassurance. He just listened. "Nobody believes me," Lily said again, and then the whole story came pouring out. The first day she saw the van. The weeks of watching. The way he said her name. Her parents' doubt. The principal's dismissal. The police officer's indifference. The nightmares. The fear that never ever stopped. The diner door opened again. Tony came out. Then Jesse. Then Ray. They formed a semicircle around Lily. Not crowding, not threatening, just present, bearing witness to her pain. Not one of them interrupted her. Not one of them told her she was imagining things or being dramatic or too sensitive. They let her speak every single word she needed to speak. When Lily finally ran out of words, when her voice gave out, and she sat there shaking in the cold rain, Bull did something that changed everything. He knelt down, got down on one knee in a puddle on Main Street, so that his eyes were level with hers, so that for the first time in weeks, an adult met her where she was instead of looking down. "We believe you," Bull said, his voice steady and sure, "and we're going to help you." Bull had a reason for believing her immediately, a reason that haunted him every single day. What Lily didn't know. These men had been waiting for a moment like this. They'd formed the Guardians precisely because they knew evil existed in the world. Knew that systems failed. Knew that sometimes it took people willing to stand in the gap between the vulnerable and the predators. Lily looked into Bull's weathered face. And for the first time in weeks, she felt something besides fear. She felt hope. Bull stood up, water dripping from his leather vest, and gestured toward the diner. "Come on inside. Let's get you warm and call your folks." Lily hesitated only a moment before following him in. The other bikers held the door. Tony, Jesse, Ray, and suddenly Lily was inside Joe's Diner, surrounded by chrome and red vinyl and the smell of coffee and bacon. Joe himself appeared from behind the counter with a blanket and a mug of hot chocolate without being asked. Bully used the diner's phone to call Lily's parents. The conversation was brief, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Jenkins, you don't know me, but your daughter is safe at Joe's Diner on Main Street. She needs you to come down here now." 17 minutes later, Lily's parents burst through the door. Her mother's face was pale with panic. Her father's jaw set with that particular anger that comes from fear. They saw Lily wrapped in a blanket in a corner booth surrounded by leather-clad bikers, and both of them froze. Lily, her mother, rushed forward, pulling her daughter into her arms. Her father positioned himself between Lily and the bikers, protective and suspicious. "What's going on here?" Michael Jenkins demanded. "Who are you people?" Bull stepped forward, hands visible and open, non-threatening despite his size. "Mr. Jenkins, Mrs. Jenkins, my name is Marcus Thompson. These are members of the Guardians Motorcycle Club. Your daughter came to us in distress and we called you immediately. But before you take her home, we need to talk about what she told us." "We've heard what she told us," Mary Jenkins said, her voice tight. "We've tried to help, but nobody believed her," Bull said quietly. "And that ends now. Sir, ma'am, your daughter is in danger. We believe her, and with your permission, we'd like to help." There was something in his voice, a weight, an authority born not from aggression, but from absolute certainty that made both parents pause. They all sat down in the largest booth. Lily between her parents, the bikers across from them, and Bull began to explain, "Have you heard of BACA? Bikers Against Child Abuse." When both parents shook their heads, Bull continued, "It's a national organization. Bikers, usually veterans, who volunteer to protect children who've been abused or are in danger. We provide a physical presence. We attend court hearings. We stand watch at homes. We're not vigilantes. And we don't break the law. We work alongside law enforcement as witnesses, as documentation, as visible deterrence. The Guardians here in Brookhaven, we operate on those same principles." "Why?" Michael asked, still skeptical. "Why would you do this?" Bull's weathered face tightened with old pain. "Because 8 years ago, my granddaughter, she was Lily's age, she told me a man was following her to school and I didn't believe her." "Not really." "I said the things adults say." "Are you sure?" "Maybe you're imagining it." "Don't worry so much." 3 weeks later, she was grabbed on her way home, missing for 6 hours. Mary's hand flew to her mouth. Lily's father leaned forward. "We found her," Bull said quickly. "She was alive, physically unharmed. But the trauma that stays, and the man who took her never caught, disappeared like smoke." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I didn't believe her when she said a man was following her to school. I failed her. I won't fail Lily." The booth was silent except for the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. After that, Jessie spoke up, her voice steady. "Bull started this chapter. All of us have our reasons for being here. Tony's niece was stalked by an ex-boyfriend when she was 15. Ray's daughter was assaulted at college. Me? I saw too many kids come through the children's ward with injuries that didn't match the stories parents told. We ride for them for all of them." "What are you proposing?" Mary asked, her nurse's pragmatism cutting through emotion. Bull pulled out a small notebook and a pen began sketching Lily's walking route from memory, based on what she told him. "Surveillance and documentation. Starting Monday morning, we'll have eyes on Lily's route. Not obvious. We'll be discreet, but we'll be there. If this van shows up, we document it. License plate, times, driver description, patterns. We build the evidence the police need to actually investigate." "Is that legal?" Michael asked. "Completely," Tony said. "We're observers on public streets. Witnesses. Same as if you hired a private investigator, except we're volunteering our time. We provide 2 things," Bull continued. 1, visible protection. This predator will see bikers around Lily. That'll either scare him off or make him sloppy. Either way, Lily stays safe. 2, documentation, real evidence. Not a child's word that adults dismiss. Hard facts, dates, times, photographic evidence if we can get it. Ray leaned forward, his gentle voice carrying conviction. "We've done this before, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, 3 times in the past 5 years. 2 cases resulted in arrests. The 3rd, the guy disappeared. We think our presence scared him into moving on. We work with Detective Mary Chun at Brookhaven PD. She knows us, trusts us. We're not cowboys. We're methodical." Lily's parents looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that come from years of marriage. Fear, desperation, hope, doubt. Finally, Mary spoke. "What do you need from us?" "Permission," Bull said simply. And trust the evidence they were about to gather would reveal something far worse than one predator. If you believe communities protect children better than systems alone, comment, "It takes a village." Because what happened next proves that sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Michael Jenkins extended his hand across the table. Bull's massive tattooed hand engulfed it. "Keep my daughter safe," Michael said, his voice breaking. "On my life," Bull replied. And everyone in that booth knew he meant it literally. Monday morning, November the 1st, Lily stepped out of her house at 7:30 wearing her Purple Star sneakers and carrying a backpack that felt lighter than it had in weeks. Not because she'd taken anything out, but because the weight pressing on her chest had finally eased. 2 blocks ahead, Tony sat on his Harley pretending to check his phone. A block behind, Ray idled his motorcycle near the corner store, sipping coffee from a thermos. They wore their full cuts, leather vests covered in patches, making no effort to hide who they were. The message was clear. This child is protected. Lily walked her usual route, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't look over her shoulder every 10 seconds. She didn't flinch at the sound of engines. She knew the rumble of those particular motorcycles now, and they meant safety. The white van appeared at its usual spot near the crossing guard station. But this time, when the driver looked out his window, he didn't see a lone 8-year-old girl. He saw 2 bikers, one ahead and one behind, watching him, watching her. Tony made direct eye contact with the driver, his expression neutral, but his presence unmistakable. The van's engine revved, then it pulled away from the curb and disappeared down a side street. Lily made it to school without a single word spoken to her by the man who had haunted her mornings for weeks. When she turned to wave at Tony before entering the building, she saw him nod once, a small gesture that said, "We've got you, kid." Over the next 7 days, the Guardians operated with military precision. They rotated shifts so the same bike wasn't always visible. Bull one morning, Jesse the next, then Rye, then Tony, sometimes 2 at once. They documented everything in small notebooks, with the kind of detail that would make a detective proud. Time, location, vehicle description, partial plate number when they could get it. Tony, who'd spent years in reconnaissance, got close enough on Tuesday to photograph the license plate clearly. By Wednesday afternoon, Bull had traced it to a rental company in Pittsburgh. Budget Renard, rented under the name David Morrison, with a credit card that, when Detective Mary Chin ran it, came back as reported stolen 2 months earlier. Red flag number 1. Thursday morning, the white van didn't appear. Instead, there was a gray sedan, different vehicle, same driver, same pattern. The bikers spotted him immediately. They'd memorized his face from the photographs Tony had taken. He was in his mid-40s, unremarkable in every way except for the intensity with which he watched children. Friday brought a blue SUV. Saturday, the one morning Lily didn't walk to school. Jesse took a ride past the elementary school anyway and spotted the same man in yet another vehicle, a tan minivan circling the parking lot during a soccer game. He was getting erratic. Changing vehicles meant he knew he'd been spotted, knew he was being watched, and instead of disappearing entirely, he was adapting. That behavior told the Guardian something important. This man wasn't opportunistic. He was compulsive-driven. Predators operate in patterns that psychologists have studied for decades. There are stages: targeting, grooming, isolating, abusing. The man following Lily had been in the grooming phase, making himself familiar, establishing presence, waiting for her to become accustomed to seeing him. The goal is to make the victim compliant through a combination of fear and normalization. It's methodical, it's patient, and it's terrifyingly effective. But something else was emerging from the documentation the bikers were building. Ray noticed at first on the second Tuesday. The driver wasn't just watching Lily anymore. He'd expanded his hunting ground. Ray followed him at a careful distance. Nothing that could be construed as harassment or stalking, and watched him circle Riverside Park for 40 minutes. Watched him focus on 4 different children. A 10-year-old boy with red hair playing basketball. Twin girls maybe 9 years old on the swings. A teenage girl, 13 or 14, walking her dog. The bikers began documenting these other children too, noting times and patterns. By the end of the second week, they had identified 4 other potential targets besides Lily. For other children whose parents had no idea they were being hunted, Lily, meanwhile, began to transform back into herself. The nightmares didn't stop completely, but they came less frequently. She started eating breakfast again. Small victories. Her mother celebrated with tears of relief. She smiled at school, talked with friends, drew pictures in art class, and she drew pictures for her guardians, butterflies and motorcycles, and stick figures with beards and leather vests. The bikers kept every single one, tucked them into their saddlebags, or taped them to their gas tanks. These rough men carrying children's art like talismans. Bull's motorcycle had a drawing of a little girl holding hands with a giant man labeled Bull in crayon. He told people who asked that it was from his granddaughter. He didn't mention that it was from a granddaughter he'd failed, and a new one he was determined to save. But what the bikers found next would turn this from one predator to something monstrous. Because on the 14th day of Operation Guardian Angel, Jessie recognized the driver's face from somewhere else entirely. And that recognition would crack open a nightmare none of them had imagined. It was Thursday afternoon when Jessie's world tilted sideways. She was sitting in the diner reviewing the photographs Tony had taken of the driver over the past 2 weeks when something clicked in her memory. That face. She'd seen it before, not on the streets of Brookhaven, somewhere else. She closed her eyes, letting her mind work backward through the catalog of faces she'd encountered. As an Army nurse, she'd been trained in observation, in remembering details that might save lives. And as a volunteer at Brookhaven General's pediatric wing, she saw dozens of faces every week. Then it hit her. "Oh my God," she whispered. Bull looked up from his coffee. "What? I know him. I've seen him at the hospital at Brookhaven General in the children's wing." The table went silent. Tony sat down his pen. Ray's hand stopped mid-reach for his water glass. "You sure?" Bull asked. Jessie's face had gone pale. "I'm sure I've seen him 3, maybe 4 times over the past month in the hallways near the playroom, once by the elevator. I thought he was a parent visiting a sick kid, but now that I'm really thinking about it, I never saw him with a child. He was just there watching." Bull pulled out his phone and dialed Detective Mary Chun. They'd been keeping her updated throughout Operation Guardian Angel, and she'd been cautiously supportive, appreciating the documentation they were providing, even if she couldn't officially endorse civilian surveillance. 20 minutes later, Detective Chin walked into Joe's diner in plain clothes. Off the clock, but all business. She sat down in the booth and looked at the photographs spread across the table. "Tell me what you've got," she said. They told her everything. The vehicles, the stolen credit card, the pattern changes, the other children being watched, and now Jessie's recognition from the hospital. Chin pulled out her laptop and began running searches. She started with the fake name from the rental agreement, David Morrison, and fed it through the national database system. 3 hits came back, 3 different aliases, all connected to the same person. "Robert Henley," Chin said quietly, turning the screen so the bikers could see. 46 years old, registered sex offender out of Ohio, required to register in any state where he resides. And according to this, he's not registered in Pennsylvania. "What was he convicted of?" Bull asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer would be bad. "Multiple counts, possession of illegal images, attempted enticement of a minor, served 4 years, released on parole 2 years ago." Chen's jaw tightened. He's violating his registration requirements. Just by being here. That alone is enough for an arrest warrant. But how did he slip through? Ray asked. "Don't you guys track these people?" Chin's expression was a mixture of frustration and shame. "We do, but the system has gaps. If he's moving frequently, using aliases, staying off the grid, it's not an excuse, but it's reality. We're understaffed, underfunded, and the database systems between states don't always communicate well." She began digging deeper, pulling phone records associated with Henley's known aliases. It took nearly an hour of database searches and cross-referencing, but when the pattern emerged, it was unmistakable. Henley's phone had been in regular contact with 14 different numbers over the past 6 months. Shen ran those numbers. Her face grew darker with each result. "Every single one," she said, her voice hollow. "Every single number belongs to a registered sex offender. Different states, different backgrounds, but all of them with prior convictions involving children." The booth was silent except for the distant sound of dishes clanking in the kitchen. "They're organized," Tony said, his Marine training recognizing tactical coordination when he saw it. "They're sharing information." Shen nodded slowly, her fingers still moving across the keyboard. "Looks like they're sharing more than information. There are patterns here." Henley shows up in Brookhaven. 2 weeks later, one of these other numbers gets calls from a Brookhaven area code. Then that person appears on traffic cameras near our elementary schools. They're not just communicating, they're coordinating hunting grounds. Bull's massive hands clenched into fists on the table. "How long?" Chin scrolled through records, her face growing paler. "Based on the phone records I can access right now, at least 6 years. This network has been operating for 6 years. 6 years of these men communicating, sharing strategies, sharing locations, sharing hunting grounds like some kind of twisted professional network. 6 years of law enforcement missing it, because each individual predator looked like an isolated case, not part of a coordinated group. This ring had operated for 6 years. 6 years of law enforcement missing it. The system hadn't just failed Lily, it had been failing children across multiple states for over half a decade. If you believe predators should face justice, if you can't stand the thought of children being hunted, comment, "No more victims." Because Lily's courage was about to bring down an entire ring. "We need to move fast," Chin said, closing her laptop. "If Henley realizes we're onto him, he'll warn the others. They'll scatter, destroy evidence, disappear into different identities. We get one shot at this." Bull leaned forward. "What do you need from us?" "Everything you've documented, every photograph, every timestamp, every observation. I'm taking this to the FBI. This crosses state lines, involves multiple jurisdictions. It's their case now." She paused, meeting each biker's eyes in turn. "And I need you to keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Keep Lily safe. Keep watching, Henley. But be careful. If he knows we're closing in, there's no telling what he might do." Friday evening, Bull was outside Joe's diner loading documentation into his saddlebag when he heard footsteps behind him. Heavy, purposeful, angry. He turned to find Robert Henley standing 10 feet away in the parking lot. Up close, Henley looked different than in the photographs. Older, harder. His eyes held something cold and calculating that made Bull's instincts honed in the jungles of Vietnam scream danger. "You need to back off," Henley said, his voice low and controlled. "You and your biker friends? You're harassing me, following me, taking pictures. That's illegal." Bull didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't show even a flicker of the adrenaline now flooding his system. "We're observing a public street, documenting suspicious behavior around children. Nothing illegal about that." Henley stepped closer. "You have no idea who you're messing with. You have no idea what you've stumbled into. Back off, last warning." Bull had faced down enemy soldiers, corrupt officials, and every shade of human evil during his 62 years on Earth. He'd learned that predators, like any other hunter, relied on fear and intimidation. And the only way to deal with them was to refuse to be intimidated. "Neither do you," Bull said quietly. "You have no idea who you're messing with. We've got everything. Every vehicle you've driven, every child you've watched, every pattern you've followed. Police are involved. FBI's been notified. It's over." For just a moment, something flickered across Henley's face. Fear, maybe, or calculation. Then he turned and walked quickly to a silver Honda parked at the edge of the lot. The engine roared to life, and he peeled out of the parking lot fast enough to leave rubber on the pavement. Bull immediately called Detective Chun. Inside the diner, the guardians gathered around Bull's phone as Chin's voice came through on speaker. "He confronted you directly. That's escalation. He's feeling cornered. Good. Tony said cornered means desperate. Desperate means mistakes are dangerous," Chin countered. "Listen to me carefully. If Henley's spooked, he'll warn the others in his network. They'll start scrubbing their digital presence, destroying hard drives, getting rid of evidence. We need to move now." The relief the bikers had felt moments ago, thinking they'd scared Henley off, thinking Lily was safe, evaporated like morning fog. "How fast can you move?" Bull asked. "I've already forwarded everything to the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit." The next morning, Detective Chun called an emergency meeting at the police station. The bikers arrived to find not just Chun, but 2 FBI agents, Special Agent Rebecca Martinez and Special Agent David Park from the Philadelphia field office. Agent Martinez spread a map across the conference table. 15 red pins marked locations across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. "Based on the phone records and your surveillance documentation, we've identified 15 individuals connected to Henley's network. Some are registered offenders who violated their requirements. Others are suspected but not yet convicted. All of them represent an immediate threat." Agent Park pulled up files on his laptop. "We're seeking warrants for all 15 locations. Simultaneous raids. If we hit them all at once, they can't warn each other. Can't destroy evidence collectively, but timing is critical." "When?" Well asked. "Monday morning, 6 a.m., coordinated across 3 states. 7 FBI field offices, multiple local police departments." Martinez looked at the bikers. "Your documentation made this possible. Without your evidence, we'd still be looking at Henley as an isolated case. You gave us the pattern we needed. In 72 hours, the FBI would execute the largest predator roundup the state had ever seen. But would it be fast enough? In 3 days, how much evidence could 15 desperate predators destroy? How many hard drives could be smashed? How many computers wiped? How many digital trails erased?" The race against time had begun, and everything, justice for Lily, safety for hundreds of other children. The dismantling of an entire predator network depended on whether law enforcement could move faster than criminals who knew they'd been discovered. The clock was ticking, And everyone in that room knew that 72 hours could feel like an eternity when children's lives hung in the balance. November 19th, 6 in the morning. The sky over Pennsylvania was still dark, stars fading into that purple-gray moment before dawn when the world holds its breath. Across 3 states and 15 different locations, FBI agents positioned themselves outside homes and apartments. Local police provided backup. U.S. Marshals covered potential escape routes. Every team was synchronized, waiting for the signal that would come simultaneously to all units. At 6 a.m. exactly, the word came through, execute. Doors came crashing down across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. FBI search warrant. The words echoed through quiet neighborhoods, shattering the morning calm in communities that thought they were safe, that had no idea predators lived among them. The Guardians weren't part of the raids. They weren't law enforcement, had no legal authority to be there. Instead, they gathered at Brookhaven Police Station in the observation room Detective Chun had arranged for them. Lily and her parents were there too, in a separate protected space with victim services counselors watching history unfold on multiple screens, showing news coverage and official updates. The first call came in at 6:17 a.m., suspect 1 in custody. Robert Henley, Brookhaven, Pennsylvania, resisted arrest. 3 agents required for restraint. Suspect's apartment currently being processed. Bull's massive frame seemed to deflate with relief. Henley, the man who haunted Lily's mornings, who threatened Bull in a parking lot, who'd started this entire investigation, was in custody. Within the hour, the arrest cascaded in like dominoes falling. 6:34 a.m., suspect 3 secured. Thomas Parks, Allentown, Pennsylvania, found with multiple computers running. Evidence of thousands of illegal images in plain view. Suspect attempting to wipe hard drives when agents entered. Devices seized before deletion complete. 6:51 a.m., suspect 7 in custody. David Morrison, Wheeling, West Virginia. Suspect's residence contain what agents are describing as a hunting journal, handwritten documentation of over 40 children, including photographs, school schedules, and home addresses. Subject is being transported now. Each report came with details that made the room grow quieter, the weight heavier. These weren't random criminals caught in unrelated crimes. They were organized, methodical, and they've been operating with terrifying efficiency. 7:22 a.m., suspect 12 secured, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Subject's vehicle contains surveillance equipment, multiple cameras with telephoto lenses, and what appears to be monitoring devices. Investigation ongoing. By 9 a.m., all 15 suspects were in custody. Not one had escaped. The coordination had been flawless. Agent Martinez arrived at the station with preliminary numbers that made even seasoned law enforcement officers go pale. 47 hard drives seized, 23 computers, 17 external storage devices, 6 phones, thousands upon thousands of photographs and videos, many still being processed and categorized by forensic specialists who would spend months reviewing evidence so horrific it would require mandatory counseling. And the victim count, preliminary, incomplete, but already staggering, stood at over 200 children documented across 6 years. 200 children who'd been watched, photographed, targeted. Some had been physically contacted. Others existed only in these predators' collections, hunting grounds mapped for future exploitation. Lily sat between her parents in the victim services room, trying to understand the magnitude of what her courage had uncovered. She thought it was just one man, just her nightmare. But it had been so much bigger, so much worse. Bull stood in the observation room, watching the mug shot appear on screens as suspects were processed. 15 faces. 15 men who'd hunted children the way he'd once hunted enemy soldiers in Vietnam. Except these men preyed on the innocent, the vulnerable, the ones who couldn't fight back. When the last arrest confirmation came through, when Agent Martinez officially declared the operation complete and successful, something broke inside Bull that he'd been holding together for 8 years. He sat down heavily in a chair and put his face in his hands. His massive shoulders shook. Jessie put her hand on his back, and Ray stood close, and Tony just bore witness because sometimes that's all brothers in arms can do for each other. Bull was crying for his granddaughter who he'd failed to protect. He was crying for Lily, who he'd managed to save. He was crying for the 200 children whose names they were still learning, whose faces filled evidence files, whose innocence had been stolen by men who were now finally in chains. This was what he couldn't do 8 years ago. This was redemption. Incomplete and painful, but real. If you stand against those who hurt children, smash that subscribe button. Trolls and predators won't, but good people, people who believe in protecting innocence, will. In a conference room down the hall, Lily's father held his daughter close while her mother wept with relief. Their 8-year-old girl, who'd been dismissed and doubted and told she was imagining things, had just helped bring down an entire predator network. Justice finally had arrived. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but when they finally move, they're inexorable. The trials took 14 months. 14 months of legal proceedings, evidence presentation, victim impact statements, and a justice system that for once worked exactly as it was supposed to. Robert Henley was the first to face trial. Federal prosecutors had built a case so airtight that even his high-priced defense attorney advised him to take a plea deal. He refused, believing he could convince a jury of his innocence. He was wrong. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a verdict. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 45 years without possibility of parole. Thomas Parks, the man from Allentown caught with thousands of illegal images, received 30 years. David Morrison and his hunting journal earned him life in prison. One by one, the 15 men faced judges and juries, and one by one, they were convicted. Sentences range from 15 years to life. Not one of them walked free. Not one escaped justice. Lily had to testify. Not in person. She was still only 9 years old by the time Henley's trial began, but via closed-circuit television from a protected room. Prosecutors wanted the jury to hear directly from her about the stalking, the fear, the weeks of being dismissed and doubted. Her parents weren't sure she could handle it. Bull wasn't sure either, but Lily, who'd grown so much in the years since the arrests, said simply, "I want to help. Other kids need to know they'll be believed." She sat in that protected room with her mother beside her and Bull waiting just outside the door, and she told her story not as a frightened child, but as a survivor who understood that her voice mattered. The prosecutor asked her questions gently, and Lily answered each one clearly, her voice steady. "Were you afraid?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," Lily said. "Every single day." "Did adults believe you when you told them?" "No, not until the bikers did." Her testimony lasted 40 minutes. When it was over, she walked out of that room and straight into Bull's arms. "I did it," she whispered. "I was brave." "You were," Bull said, his voice thick. "You were so brave." But Lily's testimony did more than help convict Robert Henley. It opened floodgates. Within 2 weeks, 27 other victims came forward. Children and teenagers who'd been documented in the evidence seized during the raids who'd been too afraid or ashamed to speak up until they saw Lily's courage. Additional charges were filed against multiple defendants. The victim count grew, and with it, the sentences lengthened. Lily began therapy the month after the arrests. Every Tuesday at 4:00, her mother drove her to Dr. Patricia Monroe's office, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. And every Tuesday at 4:00, Bull sat in the waiting room. He didn't have to be there. Lily had her parents. But Bull came anyway, reading magazines about fishing and motorcycles, drinking terrible waiting room coffee, just being present. He was there for every therapy session, every court date, every moment. Lily needed to know that someone believed in her completely and without reservation. The Guardians Motorcycle Club formally chartered as an official BACA Chapter 6 months after the arrests. Bikers Against Child Abuse recognized their work and invited them into the national organization. Within a year, they were protecting 6 other children in the Brookhaven area. Kids facing bullies, kids in foster care, kids who needed to know that strong people stood between them and harm. The national news picked up the story. Bikers Save Child Exposed Predator Ring became a headline that ran on major networks. Documentary crews came to Brookhaven. Reporters interviewed Bull, Lily's parents, Detective Chun, the FBI agents. Not everyone saw them as heroes. Some critics called them vigilantes. Online commentators argued they'd overstepped, that civilians shouldn't involve themselves in law enforcement matters, that they'd gotten lucky and could have made things worse. A few talking heads on cable news suggested the bikers had violated Henley's civil rights. Detective Mary Shan held a press conference and shut that narrative down immediately. "These citizens did exactly what we need communities to do," she said, standing at a podium with the Brookhaven police chief beside her. "They watched, they documented, they reported, they worked within the law alongside law enforcement, and they helped us build a case that put 15 predators behind bars. They didn't take justice into their own hands. They delivered evidence into ours. That's not vigilantism. That's community policing at its finest." The controversy faded. What remained was the story itself. A story about an 8-year-old girl who trusted her instincts. about bikers who looked dangerous but proved to be guardians, about a system that failed until ordinary people refused to let it. Lily turned 10, then 11. The nightmares became rare. The fear that had consumed her mornings faded into memory. She started riding on the back of Bull's motorcycle during charity events, wearing a leather jacket that Jessie had custom made for her with a patch that read Guardian Angel. If this story changed how you see bikers, motorcycle clubs, or judging people by appearance, share this video. Because stereotypes die when truth speaks louder. The trials concluded. The predators were imprisoned, and Lily Jenkins, who'd once been too afraid to walk 6 blocks to school, became something unexpected. She became an advocate, a voice, a reminder that children deserve to be believed. Lily Jenkins is 16 years old now. She stands in front of middle school assemblies across Pennsylvania, wearing jeans and a leather jacket that's become her signature. And she tells her story, not to traumatize, not to frighten, but to empower. I was 8 years old when I knew something was wrong. She tells auditoriums full of students who look at her with rapt attention. And I was right. Your instincts matter. Your voice matters. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And if the first adult doesn't believe you, find another one. Keep speaking until someone listens. She's spoken at 43 schools in the past 2 years, reached over 12,000 children. After every presentation, kids line up to talk to her, to tell her their own stories, to ask for advice. Some of them are carrying fears they've never voiced. Lily listens to every single one, and when necessary, she connects them with help. Marcus Bull Thompson passed away 2 years ago. Heart attack, peaceful in his sleep, surrounded by family. He was 70 years old and had lived to see Lily grow into the young woman he'd known she could become. Lily spoke at his funeral, stood at the podium in a church packed with bikers, veterans, and a community that had finally understood who Bull really was. She called him her guardian angel. She told stories that made people laugh and cry, and she promised him that she would carry forward his mission, protecting children, believing them, standing between innocence and evil. The Guardians Motorcycle Club chapter in Brookhaven has protected 47 children in the 8 years since Lily's case. 47 kids facing abuse, stalking, bullying, or danger. Not one child under their watch has been harmed. Not one. They work directly with Brookhaven Police. Now, a formal partnership where Detective Chun, now a captain, coordinates community safety efforts with the bikers who once operated in the gray spaces of citizen action. They attend training sessions. They understand legal boundaries. They're no longer outsiders helping from the margins. They're integrated into the community safety network. Pennsylvania passed legislation 3 years after the trials. They called it Lily's Law. It requires schools to take stalking reports from children seriously, mandates specific protocols for investigation, establishes consequences for administrators who dismiss legitimate concerns. It's not perfect, but it's a start, and it carries Lily's name as a reminder that children's voices deserve to be heard. The story inspired other BACA chapters across the country. Membership in Bikers Against Child Abuse has grown by 40% since the national news coverage. Chapters formed in cities that never had them before. Veterans who'd been looking for purpose found it in protecting children. The Brookhaven story became a blueprint for what's possible when ordinary people refuse to look away. Of the 15 men arrested that November morning, 9 remain in prison, serving long sentences. 6 have been released after serving their minimum terms, all under intensive supervision with GPS monitoring, regular check-ins, and restrictions on internet access and proximity to schools. According to official records, not one of them has reoffended. Whether that's because they've been reformed or because they're too closely watched to act, no one can say for certain. Lily's parents, Michael and Mary Jenkins, started a foundation 2 years after the trials. They called it Believe the Children. It raises money for child safety education, funds therapy for victims, and trains adults in how to listen to children's concerns. To date, they've raised over $2 million. The foundation operates across 3 states now, expanding far beyond Brookhaven's borders. Last month, the foundation held its annual charity motorcycle ride. 200 bikers participated, riding from Brookhaven to Pittsburgh and back, raising money and awareness. Lily rode on the back of Tony's motorcycle, wearing the leather jacket that Bull's widow had given her the Christmas after he died. It had been Bull's favorite jacket, worn soft from decades of wear, and it carried patches from every major ride he'd ever done. One patch sewn on by Jessie with careful stitches read, Guardian Angel. Lily held on to Tony as they rode through the Pennsylvania countryside, wind in her hair, sun on her face, surrounded by the rumble of motorcycles. and the knowledge that she was safe, that she was loved, that she had transformed her trauma into purpose. If you believe one voice can change everything, one act of courage can save hundreds. Comment, I believe in guardians. And if you know a child who needs to hear they'll be believed, share this story with them. The little girl who was once too terrified to walk to school had become a young woman who couldn't be silenced. And the men who society said were dangerous had proven to be exactly what Lily needed them to be. Protectors, believers, and heroes who wore leather instead of capes. So what does Lily's story teach us? First, that children's instincts should be trusted. When a child says they feel unsafe, when they report something that makes them uncomfortable, when they express fear, believe them. Their intuition is often sharper than our own because they haven't yet learned to rationalize away danger or convince themselves that bad things don't happen in good neighborhoods. Second, that systems fail not because the people in them are evil, but because systems are made of policies and procedures and bureaucratic gaps that predators exploit with terrifying efficiency. But when systems fail, communities can catch them. Neighbors, teachers, bikers in a diner, ordinary people who refuse to look away, who choose to act when action is needed. Third, that heroes don't always look like we expect. They don't always wear uniforms or badges. Sometimes they wear leather and ride motorcycles and have faces that society taught us to fear. Judge people by their actions, not their appearance. Because the people who will stand up for your children might be the last ones you'd expect. And fourth, that one person's courage inspires others. Lily's decision to trust those bikers in that parking lot led to 15 predators being imprisoned, dozens of other victims finding their voices, laws being changed, and a movement spreading across the country. One 8-year-old girl changed the world simply by refusing to suffer in silence. The statistics are sobering. 1 in 10 children will experience sexual abuse before they reach 18. Only 38% of child victims ever disclose what happened to them. The rest carry that trauma in silence, often for their entire lives. And predators, they groom an average of 6 victims before they're caught. 6 children whose lives are forever altered because systems moved too slowly and communities looked away. But here's what you can do. Listen to children always. When they tell you something feels wrong, take them seriously. Don't dismiss their fears as imagination or overreaction. Ask questions, investigate, be the adult who believes them. Support organizations that protect children. Bikers Against Child Abuse, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, local advocacy groups in your community. These organizations need funding, volunteers, and voices amplifying their work. Learn the signs of grooming behavior. Predators follow patterns, isolating children from support systems, creating secrets, testing boundaries, normalizing inappropriate contact. Education is protection. The more you know, the better you can safeguard the children in your life. And most importantly, be the person a child can trust. Be approachable, be safe. Be someone who will listen without judgment, who will act without hesitation, who will stand between danger and innocence. Lily wanted to leave you with a message. She recorded this last week specifically for anyone watching this story who might need to hear it. Her voice clear and strong. To anyone watching this who's scared, who thinks no one will believe them, I believe you. I know what it feels like to speak up and be dismissed. I know what it feels like to think you're crazy, that you're making something out of nothing, that maybe the adults are right and you're wrong. But you're not wrong. Your fear is real. Your instincts matter. Speak up, tell someone. And if that person doesn't listen, tell someone else. Keep speaking until someone listens, because there are guardians everywhere in police departments, in schools, in diners, in places you'd never expect. You just have to find them. And when you do, they will move heaven and earth to keep you safe. I promise you that because someone did it for me. And I'm here today because I refuse to stay silent. So don't you stay silent either. Your voice is powerful, use it. This story began with an 8-year-old girl walking to school, followed by a predator in a white van. It ends with that same girl, now 16, riding on the back of a motorcycle at a charity event, surrounded by people who love her, protected by a community that believes her, empowered by the knowledge that her courage saved hundreds of lives. Lily's journey came full circle. From fear to hope. From victim to survivor to advocate. From silence to a voice that echoes across the country, reminding everyone who hears it that children deserve to be believed, that communities can protect when systems fail, and that sometimes the angels among us wear leather and ride Harleys. If this story moved you, if you believe in protecting innocence, 3 things. 1, subscribe to Karen Tales because I tell stories that matter. Stories the world needs to hear. Stories about courage and justice and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. 2. Comment, I stand for children. Show predators that good people outnumber them, that communities are watching, that children have armies of guardians ready to fight for them. 3. Share this with someone who needs hope, who needs to know that guardians exist. Share it with parents, teachers, kids who are afraid, anyone who needs to be reminded that evil doesn't always win. And remember, evil only wins when good people stay silent. Don't be silent.